Baltic Sea. Beneath the depths, dead zones lie hidden. On the surface, life surges with vitality. So, who truly rules these waters? Leave your predictions below and join us to explore the Nature Animal documentary. Baltic Sea, breathing through the dead zones. The Baltic Sea always wavers on the boundary between fresh water and salt water. A vast brackish sea stretching over 400,000 square kilometers. It is bordered by 9 European countries: Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Germany, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Sweden, and Russia. Its only escape lies to the west, where the Baltic Sea finds its way to the North Sea through Denmark's narrow straits. It is this encircling terrain that has shaped one of Northern Europe's most unique inland seas. Each year, hundreds of rivers, along with rain and melting snow, pour into it. Yet the pathway to the Atlantic Ocean is so narrow, it feels almost suffocated. Salt water is constantly pushed back by fresh water, with salinity shifting in many different ways. Offshore, the ocean holds steady at 35 per thousand. But in the Baltic proper, the heart of the Baltic Sea, the surface measures only 3 to 9 per thousand. The heavier salt water sinks to the bottom, sealed away by the halocline. An ocean where opposing water masses imprison one another, yet never truly blend. That boundary grows even sharper in summer when the thermocline appears. Right at the surface, sunlight warms a thin layer of water. But just 5 to 10 meters down, the warmth is abruptly cut off. Temperatures can drop by as much as 10 degrees Celsius, turning the seafloor into a realm of winter water, where the breath of winter still lingers. Amid all those unpredictable shifts, life still finds a way. Many fish species have slipped through the hardship to adapt to the brackish world of the Baltic Sea. And the moment the first rays of summer sunlight touch the surface, life awakens. From that instant, the fragile foundation of the food chain here begins to take shape. The Atlantic herring is one of the very first building blocks of that foundation. This small marine fish reproduces and grows right in near freshwater conditions, where salinity drops to only 2 to 3 practical salinity units. They have given rise to a new ecotype, the Baltic herring. To adapt to the Baltic Sea, the Baltic herring has had to rebuild its body from the ground up. In its gills, ionocyte cells constantly shift their function. When swimming in fresher waters, they hold on to salt, powerfully reabsorbing ions to maintain the osmotic pressure of the blood. Moving out into saltier waters, they push ions outward, preventing salt from flooding into the body. The kidneys also constantly switch roles, focusing on processing ions and limiting urination in low salinity waters. The need to drink almost disappears, freeing the intestines from their heavy burden. These subtle adjustments have turned the herring into a true master of survival. The Baltic Sea is no longer harsh, but instead becomes their #1 stronghold. The flounder is another vivid testament to evolution in the brackish, challenging waters of the Baltic Sea. The European flounder has kept its ancient habit of releasing floating eggs offshore. However, their eggs can only remain suspended when salinity reaches 11 to 16.5 practical salinity units. This confines the species to the central and southwestern Baltic, where the saltier waters support the survival of their embryos. In contrast, the Baltic flounder has discovered a new path to survival. They lay their eggs on the seafloor, where development remains stable in low salinity, only 5 to 7 practical salinity units. An osmoregulatory mechanism similar to that of the herring has helped them solve the challenge of adapting to the Baltic Sea. A different strategy, opening the door to reproduction, even in the fresher coastal waters that are unfavorable to their relatives. The two flounder species coexist, yet remain clearly divided by how they confront ecological limits. An evolutionary story written in the very heart of the Baltic, where every drop of water both challenges and shapes the destiny of each species. The European sprat has even turned the stratified water column of the Baltic Sea into a unique cradle for reproduction. Their eggs float in suspension, seeking zones just salty enough for embryos to develop, yet with enough oxygen to keep them from suffocating. Thanks to their small size, low density, and natural buoyancy, the eggs of this fish are rarely drawn down into the suffocating dead zones. Together with the herring, the sprat has created a silver sea layer, the immense energy reserve of the Baltic Sea. The boom of these small fish is the very first brushstroke on the colorful canvas of the Baltic Sea ecosystem. A large bird with a wingspan of 121 to 160 centimeters, yet not skilled in graceful flight. Its body weight, reaching nearly 4 kilograms, has taken away its ability to truly master the skies. Each day, this bird spends only about 25 minutes in the air, with each flight lasting an average of just 92 seconds. In return, the strength of the great cormorant lies in its diving ability. They plunge straight into shimmering schools of fish. Using water resistance, they glide effortlessly and with striking grace beneath the surface. A refined mechanism of drag-based propulsion. The great cormorant can reach depths of around 9.5 meters. They dive straight into the heart of the school, reaching speeds of up to 1.5 meters per second. Their streamlined bodies and flexible necks, panicked prey that stray from the group, are instantly seized. With bottom-dwelling fish, which make up as much as 60% of the great cormorant's diet, this bird relies on a different tactic. They press their prey against the seafloor or hidden structures. When the moment comes, the neck snaps back instantly to seize the catch. With keen vision and sharp hearing, they can easily spot and detect even the slightest movement of gobies, sticklebacks, or perch. Unlike many seabirds, the plumage of the great cormorant is not fully waterproof. This allows them to reduce buoyancy and slip quickly into the vast hunting grounds below. After each dive, they return to rocky shores and spread their wings wide under the sun. There, they dry their feathers and regulate body temperature after their time underwater. In the early 20th century, the great cormorant nearly vanished from the Baltic due to heavy hunting. It was not until the 1990s that their population surged back, spreading and stabilizing at around 50,000 breeding pairs. Today, they have become an essential part of the coastal ecological picture. A top predator with the power to reshape the small fish communities of the Baltic Sea. That strength is shared by the great cormorant with the grey seal. The Baltic subspecies became genetically distinct from their North Atlantic relatives more than 1 million years ago. They have since formed a separate population. The apex predators of these brackish waters. A Baltic Sea apex predator reaching up to 2 meters in length and weighing as much as 400 kilograms. The grey seal is spread across the Baltic, from the icy Gulf of Bothnia down to the rocky islets of the central region and out toward Kattegat. Wherever schools of small fish like sprat or herring appear, the grey seal is quick to follow. Their hunts often take place at depths of around 70 meters. They chase schools of fish through the water column or drive prey up from the seafloor. At times, the grey seal feeds around the fishing nets of local vessels. They linger nearby and knock fish free from the mesh. This tactic makes up only about 3% of their hunting time, yet its success rate is the highest, reaching up to 51%. In the 20th century, the grey seal stood on the brink of disappearance. From around 100,000 individuals, their numbers fell to just 5,000 in the 1970s due to chemical pollution, hunting and habitat loss. But thanks to conservation efforts, hunting bans, and environmental improvements, the population has rebounded. Today, about 55,000 individuals have returned to the Baltic Sea, a rare testament to revival in these challenging waters. If you were to become a predator in the Baltic Sea, would you be a grey seal or a great cormorant? Leave a comment below and let us know what impressed you most about the hunting skills of these two species. In contrast to the bustle above, the depths of the Baltic Sea sink into pale, muted tones. The year-round halocline, together with the summer thermocline, blocks circulation. The heavy saltwater layer lies trapped beneath the fresher waters. All mixing comes to a halt. With oxygen cut off, the seafloor is slowly suffocated. Dead zones expand step by step, encroaching on the realm of life. Over the past century, their area has grown from just 5,000 square kilometers to between 60,000 and 70,000 square kilometers. That figure amounts to nearly 1/6 of all dead zones worldwide. In this oxygen-starved world, only anaerobic microorganisms remain. Sulfate-reducing bacteria continuously generate hydrogen sulfide. Many areas have even entered a state of euxinia, marked by both a lack of oxygen and the buildup of hydrogen sulfide. Here, almost no other form of life can endure. And yet, right in the middle of those oxygen-poor zones lurks a silent intruder. The warty comb jelly, first appearing in 2006 to 2007 in Kiel Fjord, it quickly spread to the Bay of Bornholm and the Bay of Gdansk. But in the northern Baltic, this species cannot reproduce sustainably. The warty comb jelly can survive in the middle layers, just above the oxygen-poor bottom. They persist in areas where oxygen hovers at the bare minimum. They avoid the anoxic zones rich in hydrogen sulfide. For once they enter a world where oxygen is fully depleted, they are instantly stifled, just like many other multicellular organisms. The hunting strategy of the warty comb jelly also shifts with age. When young, they use their tentacles to capture food, a method known as tentaculate feeding. As adults, they switch to lobate feeding, using broad oral lobes to funnel in streams of plankton and fish larvae. This very change once caused the collapse of fisheries in the Black Sea as they consumed eggs and larvae, breaking the chain of population renewal. And now, similar signs are beginning to appear in the Baltic. When the first autumn winds arrive, the stratified structure of the Baltic Sea begins to waver. Salt water from the bottom is pushed upward, causing surface salinity to rise slightly. Yet rivers continue to pour in fresh water, keeping the sea surface from ever reaching the salinity of the open ocean. The result is a mixed layer, saltier than in summer, yet still fresher than offshore waters. Oxygen, though scarce, begins to return. Saltier, heavier, oxygen-rich waters from the North Sea flow in through Kattegat, sinking deep and pushing out the oxygen-poor layers. Kattegat becomes the rare lung that allows the Baltic Sea to breathe again. Events like these are known as major Baltic inflows. Each type of major Baltic inflow has its own characteristics, but all share the same impact. They breathe new life into the Arkona, Bornholm, and Gotland basins, places where the seafloor is often steeped in hypoxia. The bottom receives oxygen that no other process could deliver. The dense stratification has blocked all diffusion from above. In December 2023, a massive major Baltic inflow carried 75 cubic kilometers of salt water into the Baltic Sea. Bottom salinity reached 22 practical salinity units, with oxygen levels rising to 7.5 to 8 milliliters of oxygen per liter of seawater. Around 0.8 teraton of oxygen was delivered into the Arkona Basin, a rare breath of revival for a long-standing dead zone. The harbour seal crossed the Kattegat Strait to settle in the central Baltic Sea about 8,000 years ago. They live mainly around the Kalmar Strait in a few small and isolated coastal sites. Along the western coast of the Baltic Sea, the harbour seal finds everything it needs. These are its familiar haul-out spots, often rocky shores right by the sea's edge, close to hunting grounds. Here, they rest, molt, and give birth. Such coastal sites also allow them to slip quickly back into the water if they feel threatened. Harbour seals hunt mainly near the coast, where cod and herring gather seasonally. But they are not confined to shallow waters. Some individuals have been recorded diving as deep as 500 meters in search of prey, a remarkable figure for a coastal species. When hunting large schools of fish, harbour seals charge straight into the swarm. They throw the school into chaos and quickly pick off isolated targets. This tactic is especially effective against cod and herring, which tend to swim in dense clusters. In shallower waters rich with plankton, harbour seals switch to filter feeding, using their teeth like a fine mesh to sift food from the water. The harbour seal once stood on the brink of extinction due to hunting and pollution in the early 20th century. By the 1970s, only about 10 breeding females remained, leaving behind an unusually poor genetic record for a marine mammal. However, thanks to hunting bans and environmental protection, the population began to recover. The number counted during molting season rose from just 50 individuals between 1977 and 1985 to 588 individuals in 2008, reflecting back the position and size of its prey. The frequency, intensity, and even rhythm of these signals shift fluidly with the seasons, between day and night, and depending on the type of fish. It is this very flexibility that has allowed the small whale to endure in seas that are always in flux. But that life comes at the cost of an immense metabolic rate. An adult consumes an amount of fish equal to 10% of its body weight each day. This forces them to hunt almost non-stop, moving constantly through coastal waters, river mouths, and shallow bays. Harbor porpoises sometimes fall into the sights of the grey seal. This behavior has been observed since the late 2000s, marked by distinctive bite traces on their bodies. The head or rear torso is torn with patches of muscle tissue missing, wounds completely different from those caused by sharks or ship propellers. The hunting tactic of the grey seal when targeting a harbor porpoise is very different from when catching fish. They approach silently from behind or from below the belly. Once in range, they burst forward with sudden speed, biting hard into the belly or the back near the dorsal fin. That first bite is often decisive, leaving the prey unable to escape. The grey seal focuses on the muscle tissue and the energy-rich blubber, leaving behind bones and internal organs. This selective feeding creates large tears, completely different from the killing patterns of other predators. The targets are mainly young porpoises or smaller individuals, usually less than 1.5 meters long. The weaker, slower juveniles become the easiest to bring down. Unlike orcas, which hunt small whales cooperatively, the grey seal always acts alone. This is the result of individual learning, behavior acquired by a single animal, then repeated once it proves effective. Even in a sea as familiar as the Baltic, predators can still write new chapters in the game of survival. But in this game of survival, there are no familiar faces like sharks or whales, distributed in the east and the west. Among them, the eastern Baltic population has evolved over thousands of years to adapt to the harsh conditions here. They carry special genetic variants that regulate salt retention and water balance within the body. In the fresher waters, where the risk of salt loss is constant, they activate ion pumps in the gills to maintain homeostasis. They seek out water columns with a salinity of about 14.5 practical salinity units. There, the eggs can drift safely in suspension. If the salinity is any lower, the eggs sink into oxygen poor zones and life is cut off before it even begins. When the environment shifts abruptly, the body of the cod responds with flexibility. They intensify ion pumping and release stress-protecting hormones such as cortisol and the protein HSP70. It is the final safeguard for survival. If a grey seal were to face an orca in the Baltic Sea, waters that are not the orca's familiar territory, who do you think would come out on top? Leave your guess in the comments and keep watching the video to find the answer. Following the currents from Kattegat, some creatures arrive in the Baltic Sea from the open ocean. But these distant visitors do not stay for long. The brackish environment does not suit bodies accustomed to the salinity of the open sea. However, not every species can find its way back out through the narrow straits. The orca is an apex predator that has crossed through the Kattegat Strait. But the Baltic Sea is not its familiar domain. No resident population exists in these ever-shifting brackish waters. They are only recorded sporadically as wanderers or temporary visitors. In 2024, an orca was recorded in the Öresund Strait, the boundary between Denmark and Sweden. Its appearance was tied to a tuna safari, when large schools of prey such as mackerel or herring pass through the strait. The Öresund is considered a natural funnel where fish gather before spreading into the Baltic proper. It is this convergence of prey that drew the giant predator in, even if only for a fleeting moment. This is not the first time orcas have taken advantage of the bottleneck terrain of straits to hunt. Not far away in the Atlantic Ocean, they often intercept schools of tuna at the Gibraltar Strait. Their immense stamina allows them to pursue prey continuously for about 30 minutes. The exhausting chase drains the tuna, leaving them sluggish and easy to seize. In addition, orcas also employ a tactic known as depredation. They approach fishermen's nets and pull tuna out from inside. In some situations, they even coordinate in groups. One group distracts the boats, while the other quietly slips in from behind to snatch the fish. For the orca, mobility lies at the heart of every hunting strategy. They can travel hundreds, even thousands of kilometers to follow schools of fish. But at times, a single sudden turn can carry them into unfamiliar waters. And if they cannot find their way back to the open sea, the ocean's ruler must face many challenges tied to adaptation and food supply. Pinnipeds are among the favorite prey of orcas. This is especially true for the transient orca groups in the Pacific and the Type B groups in Antarctica. The ocean's top predator has even developed unique strategies to take down seals resting on ice. They charge together beneath the surface, reaching speeds of up to 55 kilometers per hour, generating waves that shatter the ice and send the prey tumbling into the water. The bolder orcas may launch themselves straight onto ice floes or rocky shores. They deliberately beach themselves to snatch the prey, then quickly slide back into the ocean. At times, they even strip seals of their sense of direction by tossing them high into the air. This is the orca's way of reducing the risk of injury when approaching a fierce and struggling prey. But the absence of orcas in the Baltic Sea has, in a way, eased the pressure on the pinnipeds living here. The grey seal has become the top predator, ruling through all 4 seasons. The shallow seas and narrow bays give them plenty of escape routes whenever the rare silhouette of an orca appears. Without companions to form a hunting formation, the orca has little chance of cornering seals in such a complex seascape. Much like the orca, the humpback whale is also a wayward visitor to the Baltic Sea. This is a creature of the open ocean, where it hunts using the bubble net feeding technique on schools of fish and krill. The Baltic, with its smaller size and limited food supply, cannot serve as a lasting habitat. And yet, compared to the orca, the humpback whale has far more often wandered into the Baltic Sea. Most recently, in February 2025, an individual about 7 meters long became entangled in nets at Międzyzdroje, Poland, before being freed by a rescue team. 2 months later, off Hiddensee in Germany, a young whale was spotted curiously swimming alongside a fishing boat for 20 minutes before heading toward Bornholm. By July 2025, another young whale appeared north of Rügen Island, repeatedly slapping its tail on the surface, a characteristic communication display of a male. Scientists believe that young humpback whales are more likely to stray into the Baltic Sea due to disorientation during migration. Their curiosity, tail-slapping behavior, and even the risk of entanglement all reflect a sense of being misplaced in waters that do not suit them. They call this a false migration. Migrations gone off course, with causes that remain unclear. But not every migration is like that. In the Baltic Sea, autumn witnesses more than a few spectacular journeys against the current. These are homecomings made at the cost of life itself for the sake of reproduction. Here, no species endures a harsher migration than the Atlantic salmon. They are born in freshwater lakes high upstream. The young hatch in spring, living off their yolk sacs. They hide along the lakebed for 1 to 4 years. When they reach about 11 to 12 centimeters, they take on a shining coat of silver scales. It is the signal of smoltification, a physiological transformation that allows them to leave freshwater for the sea. Their gills and kidneys change. Ion pumps begin to work in a new way, helping them regulate salt and water within the body. From early spring to early summer, schools of smolts drift downstream, making their way toward the Baltic. Here, the salmon grow at a remarkable pace. Adults can reach over 100 centimeters in length and weigh up to 12 kilograms if they remain in the sea long enough. They store up energy for about 1 to 3 years before embarking on the most important migration of their lives. Guided by Earth's magnetic field, the scent of the water, and chemical traces, the salmon find their way back to the very rivers where they were born. They swim upstream, surmounting rapids and waterfalls to return to the gravel beds. From late autumn to early winter, the females dig fresh nests, preparing to welcome a new generation. After spawning, the Atlantic salmon falls into a state of exhaustion. Many do not survive, but not all. Unlike the salmon of the Pacific, the Atlantic salmon can endure, recover, and return once more. It is a closed yet resilient life cycle, linking rivers and seas and writing one of nature's greatest migration stories. As the salmon drift downstream toward the open sea, in the Baltic, the Northern Pike lies in ambush at river mouths and brackish coastal zones among seagrass meadows and marshes. When the salmon schools have yet to arrive, they turn to other prey such as small fish, frogs, or at times even water birds. Even their own kind, other pike, can become targets when food is scarce. Their flexible feeding strategy makes them the freshwater crocodiles of Europe, with bodies reaching up to 1.5 meters in length and weighing as much as 28 kilograms. The Baltic Sea also witnesses the highly adaptive breeding strategy of the Northern Pike. Some populations lay their eggs directly in the brackish coastal waters. The phenomenon of homing, returning to the exact place of birth, creates distinct local populations with little genetic exchange between regions. If the Northern Pike ambushes salmon on their way downstream, the white-tailed eagle patiently waits as the salmon swim upstream. The largest eagle in Europe soars across the sky with a wingspan of up to 2.45 meters. Its sharp eyes remain fixed on the rivers, boiling with the movement of salmon. But salmon are not the only prey of the white-tailed eagle. As an apex predator of the Baltic Sea, it has a menu both varied and flexible. In inland areas and during the breeding season, fish and water birds make up the main diet. And when it turns to the coasts, it shifts to diving birds such as eiders, or fish taken from the surface. Even scarce food supplies cannot hinder the white-tailed eagle. This bird is a master of kleptoparasitism, the act of stealing prey. It stalks its own kind or other bird species, then swoops in to snatch food straight from the talons of its rival. When winter arrives, it readily turns to carrion, especially fish washed ashore. The 20th century once saw a dramatic collapse of the white-tailed eagle. Hunting, habitat destruction, and the toxin DDT nearly wiped the species out of the Baltic Sea. But since the 1980s, thanks to conservation laws and environmental improvements, the population has rebounded strongly. Today, it stands as a vivid symbol of revival across Scandinavia and along the Baltic coasts. If you were to become a salmon hunter, would you chase them beneath the river like the Northern Pike, or strike from above like the white-tailed eagle? When the salmon complete their upstream journey, the Baltic Sea begins to enter its cold winter. In the southern regions, temperatures still stay above 0 degrees Celsius, keeping seawater flowing for the ecosystem. But in the north, such as the Gulf of Bothnia, sea ice completely covers the ocean's surface. However, sea ice in the Baltic Sea is not uniform. The thin layer forms through a mix of processes including congelation, snow ice, and frazzle ice. Winter is also the season of heavy rain and snowfall. Yet climate change is shortening the ice season, reducing both its extent and thickness, with snowfall days decreasing by 3 to 5 days per decade. The disappearance of sea ice has a major impact on the Baltic Sea ecosystem. The ice surface serves as an important breeding ground for many large species, and along its edges, countless creatures struggle against the cold, waiting for the fresh pulse of nutrients brought by the first sunlight of spring. No species is more closely tied to sea ice than the ringed seal. In these waters, a distinct subspecies has even formed, the Baltic ringed seal, one of the few remaining icy icons. With bodies measuring 1.5 to 1.75 meters long and weighing over 120 kilograms, they claim the snowy expanses for rest and reproduction. They are spread across the northern Baltic Sea, with the Bay of Bothnia alone hosting a population of 20,000 individuals. With strong claws on their foreflippers, the ringed seal carves breathing holes through thick ice. This is how they maintain access to oxygen during long winter dives. When the snow lies deep enough, the mothers dig out snow layers to give birth and raise their young. In those cold, white chambers, the pups are born, wrapped in thick white fur to withstand the harsh chill. The pups remain in the layers for up to 6 weeks. They are nursed and protected by their mothers until the ice begins to melt in spring. Afterward, both mother and pup still linger on the ice to molt, a behavior that is very rare in the pinniped world. When the ice fully vanishes in summer and autumn, restoring the vast brackish waters of the Baltic Sea, the ringed seal begins to hunt. They dive deep in search of small fish, herring or sprat, building up fat reserves to endure the winter and fuel reproduction. In contrast, when the sea is ice-covered and food is scarce, they move less and spend more time resting beneath the surface. This is how they conserve energy while the Baltic Sea lies quietly asleep beneath its thin sheet of ice. Like many other species, the Baltic Sea is also the stage for the ringed seal's recovery. In the 1970s, their numbers fell to just around 5,000 individuals under the heavy toll of hunting and pollution. But thanks to hunting bans and environmental improvements, the population has rebounded to about 25,000. A clear reminder that nature can recover, if only we give it the chance. When much of the sea surface freezes, the whooper swan quietly forages along the coasts. Grasses and aquatic plants are the scarce nutrition that endures through the cold. It is the narrow stretches, untouched by ice and snow, that turn into oases of life for entire flocks during the winter. The whooper swan is the heaviest bird capable of flight in these waters. It carries a wingspan of 2.05 to 2.75 meters. Its engine, for lifting a body 1.4 to 1.6 meters long, and weighing up to 10 kilograms into the air. In recent years, this bird has even begun nesting on offshore islands in Finland and the Leningrad region of the Baltic Sea. Ringed seal, viviparous eelpout, or whooper swan. Which one do you think is the true ice king of the Baltic Sea? Share your choice with us in the comments. Ice sheets turn into an ideal cradle for reproduction in the heart of winter on the Baltic Sea. But hidden beneath, a fierce arena of hunting takes shape. There, the hunters have traded their journey toward the warm southern waters for the chance to seek nourishment in the cold currents. The common eider, the largest sea duck in Europe, is among the most eager predators. In winter, they leave their breeding grounds and gather into massive flocks that blanket the surface of the western Baltic and the Kattegat. With bodies measuring 50 to 71 centimeters in length and weighing around 2 kilograms, they swiftly dive to the seafloor. Their wings, spanning 80 to 110 centimeters, when the ice fades and the breeding season arrives, the common eider returns to coastal islands and nests in clusters. The females tend to come back very close to the place where they first hatched to begin nurturing the next generation. They pluck the soft down from their chests to line the nests. And within those warm shelters, eider eggs are kept safe amid the chilly winds of the northern seas. Yet it is that very layer of down that places the common eider under heavy pressure from hunting. The prized eider down, with its remarkable ability to retain warmth, has long been sought after by people to fill luxury bedding. This demand has caused the common eider population to decline by more than 51% compared to the 1 million individuals recorded in the 1990s. In contrast to the birds that head south for warmth, thousands of common mergansers migrate from Fennoscandia and northwestern Russia to the Baltic Sea. They arrive here in the midst of the icy winter, turning these cold waters into a lively wintering ground. When hunting, they dart into open waters where the sea ice cannot catch up. With slender bodies measuring 58 to 69 centimeters and sharp pointed bills, they become top hunters beneath the freezing waters. The common merganser feeds mainly on fish such as salmon, carp, herring, and even eels, at a much higher rate than many other duck species. Their sharp eyesight allows them to spot prey even in murky waters. They can dive straight to the bottom, slipping their long, serrated-edged bills into mud or rocky crevices to firmly grasp their catch. With a cooperative strategy, individuals line up one after another, forming a chain of simultaneous hunters that makes it difficult for fish to slip through the net. The common merganser is also known for its remarkable social behavior. In winter, they gather in large flocks on lakes, rivers, and ice-free coastal areas. At times, they even join flocks of golden eyes or other diving ducks. This collective strength not only helps them feed more efficiently, but also offers a layer of protection against predators. In spring, the common merganser returns north to breed. They choose a wide variety of nesting sites, from hollow trees and rocky crevices to even artificial nest boxes placed by people. After 1 month of incubation, the chicks hatch and immediately leave the nest, following their mother into the water to feed on their own. Their sense of unity continues to shine as the young often gather into large groups for shared care and to lessen the chance of being approached by predators. The plunges of the common merganser into the sea feel like an awakening of spring on the Baltic Sea. The brackish waters greet the season with a powerful surge. Spring bloom, a vast explosion of algae beneath the waters, just as the ice has melted away. In the western Baltic, algae blooms from February to March, while farther north, the late spring delays this phenomenon until May. Diatoms are the first to take the stage. They grow rapidly, dominating the water column. Then, as nutrients become depleted, dinoflagellates emerge. They grow more slowly but with endurance, stretching out through the entire bloom. Rising temperatures and longer days play a crucial role. The strong sunlight drives photosynthesis. Thermal and salinity stratification stabilizes the environment, holding nutrients within the right layers of water. This becomes the very foundation of primary production, the engine that sets the spring food chain in motion. But this very spring bloom turns into a double-edged sword. When the massive volume of algae dies, it sinks to the seafloor. The decomposition process quickly consumes oxygen, leaving many deep water areas in a state of depletion, even hypoxia. In places with poor water circulation, this threat becomes especially pronounced, pushing bottom-dwelling creatures to the edge of survival. Even so, spring on the Baltic remains a season of renewal. After the harsh winter months, this is the moment for marine life to recover, to reproduce, and to burst forth in abundance. A glorious yet fragile beginning where life and loss move side by side in the endless rhythm of this brackish sea. The thriving of the three-spined stickleback seems to carry the vitality of spring throughout the entire Baltic Sea ecosystem. The seagrass meadows are no exception. The layers of common eelgrass, the only seagrass able to survive in brackish waters, begin to awaken, and with them, an entire food chain stirs to life. Amid those seagrass meadows, the Eurasian otter quietly searches for food. This small otter, found across much of Europe, has mastered both the freshwater lakes and the brackish coastal edges of the Baltic Sea. Each type of water plays a vital role in the survival patterns of this creature. In the seagrass meadows, river mouths or tidal flats, the Eurasian otter hunts for fish, crabs or frogs. But when it needs to wash its fur after a hunt, it returns to freshwater lakes. Its thick coat, with a density of 50,000 to 70,000 hairs per square centimeter, is the thermal armor that shields it from the harsh winter. The outer layer is coarse and long to repel water, while the inner layer is dense and velvety, soft to trap air. The ecological role of the Eurasian otter goes far beyond that of a predator. As they dig through seagrass beds, they leave behind pits and grooves on the seabed. These disturbances stimulate regeneration and genetic diversity in the seagrass, increasing abundance by up to 30% in areas where they remain for long periods. This is a prime example of a reverse relationship, where a predator not only consumes, but also indirectly shapes habitats for countless other species. In contrast to the Eurasian otter, the mute swan sometimes devastates the coastal seagrass beds of the Baltic Sea. Unlike many diving birds, they choose to forage on aquatic plants in shallow waters. Their long necks reach down, aided by strong legs, to pull up roots in search of food. In large flocks, this feeding strategy can strip seagrass meadows by 75 to 100% in shallow areas, greatly reducing both coverage and biomass density. The life of the mute swan is closely tied to fidelity. They live as monogamous pairs, guarding their territory and nest together. Each clutch consists of 4 to 10 eggs, incubated for over a month. The chicks, once hatched, can immediately climb onto their parents' backs or shelter beneath their wings to escape the cold rain. When threatened, both mother and father are ready to confront intruders to protect their young. The skies over the Baltic Sea also come alive as spring arrives. Birds from the south, from distant continents, begin to return. Their homecoming marks a new rhythm of life, closing the annual cycle in this brackish sea. The common tern is the very symbol of that rhythm of life. They leave the Baltic when winter sets in, flying thousands of kilometers to spend the season along the coasts of West Africa and South Africa. Some individuals even journey through the Mediterranean and East Africa. When spring returns, the common tern embarks once more on its journey home. From tropical shores, they fly thousands of kilometers in just about 40 days to reach the north. They land at the Baltic Sea from early to mid-May. Those that arrive early, with greater stamina, secure the most favorable nesting sites and gain a better chance at successful breeding. Unlike the common tern, the Baltic Sea is only a temporary stopover in the long journey of the barnacle goose. This bird carries within it a migration rhythm that connects the two extremes of the Earth, from the icy Arctic to the temperate coasts of Europe. Each spring, the migration begins anew. From the Wadden Sea, the barnacle goose departs in April and heads northward. The Baltic Sea becomes an essential stopover. The fields of Gotland or Estonia's Matsalu Bay can host between 8,000 and 14,000 individuals at a time. They rest for a few days to several weeks, replenishing their energy with seagrass before continuing their journey to the Arctic breeding grounds. The strategy of the barnacle goose is known as the green wave. They follow the flush of newly sprouting vegetation. In this way, they always reach the most nutrient-rich food along their route. Although some flocks have shifted their paths due to food pressure, most remain faithful to the Baltic stopover. After recharging their energy, the journey of the barnacle goose continues. Some individuals choose to cross the narrow Kattegat Strait, gliding gracefully over the skies of Skagerrak before heading toward a vast expanse of water. The North Sea. The low oxygen zones have diminished, and life seems to have been gently revived in this place. The stable seafloor has made the North Sea a hub of biodiversity in the northeastern Atlantic. According to a 2020 report by Oceania Europe, more than 230 fish species inhabit these waters. The North Sea is also home to 3 pinniped species and between 27 to 36 cetacean species, 31 seabird species, totaling around 2.5 million breeding pairs, return to these waters each year to nest. Even the ocean's top predators gather here. Is it the killer whale, or are there other silent hunters lurking in these depths? Keep watching the video to find out. At the northern edge of the North Sea, ancient glaciers carved the land into a maze of rock and water that hugs the western coast of Norway. This is the Norwegian fjords, a system of 1,200 fjords with complex terrain dotted with countless skerries. At the boundary between the North Sea and the icy Norwegian Sea, oxygen and microorganisms continuously circulate through this network. This creates an ideal habitat for both endemic and migratory species. Cold water corals like Lophelia pertusa cling to the deep rock walls. Populations of deep-sea sponges, brittle stars, and sea cucumbers blanket the canyon floors. Atlantic cod, herring, mackerel, and blue whiting gather seasonally, providing a rich food source for marine mammals. Leaving the maze of rock and water behind, the sea opens up to the northwest before meeting the barrier of the Shetland Islands. Spanning nearly 1,500 square kilometers across more than 100 islands, this is the natural boundary between the North Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. The oceanic temperate climate, combined with nutrient-rich waters from the North Atlantic Current, has sparked a surge in biodiversity around the Shetland Islands. Over 430 bird species migrate through the islands, and 70 seabird species nest here annually, forming a population of more than 1 million individuals. Cetacean species appear around the islands during the summer months, from May to August. The Shetland Islands also host around 1,000 otters, one of the densest populations in all of Europe. The foundation of the rich ecosystem in the Shetland Islands begins with the kelp forests that thrive in the sublittoral zone. Laminaria hyperborea is the dominant species, forming underwater canopies that stretch down as deep as 30 meters. Beneath these dense forests lies an entire world of vibrant life. More than 1,800 species of aquatic plants and animals have been recorded in the kelp forests of the United Kingdom, including those around the Shetland Islands. These forests provide shelter for small fish and benthic invertebrates such as starfish, snails, and sea cucumbers. Each square meter can hold up to 100,000 individuals. This makes kelp forests an ideal hunting ground for marine mammals. Kelp forests also serve as the first line of defense for the shores of the Shetland Islands. They absorb wave energy and reduce coastal erosion. These forests store blue carbon, playing a vital role in restoring and protecting the marine environment. Grey seals are marine top predators along the coastal waters of the Shetland Islands. They hunt a variety of prey, from demersal fish like cods and flatfish to herring, and especially American sand eel. When food becomes scarce, these pinnipeds adapt by feeding on squid, crustaceans, or other invertebrates. Grey seals are benthic foragers. Although capable of diving to depths over 300 meters, they typically hunt in shallower waters around 70 meters deep. During foraging, they often perform U-shaped or square dives near the seafloor to search for prey. The complex terrain, crisscrossed with rocks, cliffs, and shallow bays of the Shetland Islands, poses no challenge to the agile swimming of grey seals. On the contrary, they use this rugged landscape to hide and ambush their prey. Once a target is spotted, they use their front flippers to pin it down and their teeth to tear it apart. However, grey seals do not need to feed constantly. They actively build up fat reserves in the period leading up to breeding season, and they fast completely while giving birth and caring for their pups. But in the presence of the ocean's top predator, grey seals fall completely silent. That predator is the orca, also known as the killer whale. They travel through oceans across the globe and often pass by the Shetland Islands between March and September each year. Orcas are the largest members of the Delphinidae family. Adult males can grow up to 8 meters long and weigh over 6 tons. They sit at the very top of the food chain with no natural predators. Orcas hunt in small pods of 4 to 12 individuals. When they spot a school of herring or mackerel, they immediately fall into formation to carry out their famous carousel feeding strategy. They take turns blowing bubbles and using sound to herd the fish into a large bait ball ranging from 2 to 7 meters in diameter. Some individuals dive beneath or lobtail to apply pressure and maintain the shape of the bait ball. After the herding phase, the orcas begin their attack. They take turns slapping the bait ball with powerful tail strikes. Each strike can stun or knock out 10 to 15 fish at once. Finally, the orcas leisurely pick through their catch, often keeping the tastiest parts and discarding the bones and heads. A carousel feeding hunt can last anywhere from 10 minutes to 3 hours, depending on the size of the bait ball and the number of orcas involved. According to the 2022 study, Feeding Characteristics and Prey Profitability in 5 herring-feeding killer whales in northern Norway by the University of St. Andrews, orcas can consume about 1.08 herring per minute. Carousel feeding is not only an efficient hunting technique, it's also a way for them to teach their young, passing down knowledge through generations. Orcas do not reside permanently in the Shetland Islands. They stop by these waters to seek mating opportunities and to hunt grey seals. Orcas stalk the rocky shorelines where seal colonies rest, bask in the sun, or care for their young. They target individuals that have strayed from the group or those lying close to the water's edge. Then, with a sudden flick of the tail, they create a wave that washes the seal off the rock. The rest of the pod surges in like black arrows, closing in to share the catch. Grey seals resting deep within rocky outcrops often meet the same fate. Orcas can launch half their bodies onto shallow rocks, a rare behavior among dolphins. They willingly risk temporary stranding to grab their prey, then push themselves back into deeper waters. Beneath the surface, the hunt unfolds with greater speed. The orca pod spreads out to block every escape route, cornering grey seals between the narrow rocky crevices of the Shetland Islands. Desperate to flee, the panicked seals bolt toward open water, unaware of the trap the orcas have already set. Sometimes, orcas toy with their prey instead of finishing the hunt right away. They toss the seal into the air, or hold it gently in their jaws without biting down. This is how they teach the young the hunting techniques of the pod. Above the fierce chase between orcas and grey seals, common murreys gather on the steep cliffs of the Shetland Islands to breed. They don't build nests. Instead, they lay their eggs directly between their feet. Each breeding cycle produces only a single egg. Both parents take turns incubating it for about 30 days. The common murre is a true bird of the sea. Chicks take their first plunge into the ocean at just 21 days old. In their early weeks, their fragile wings are supported and protected by the father as they begin life in open water. As adults, common murreys can grow to a length of 38 to 43 centimeters. At this stage, their wingspan can exceed 70 centimeters. This allows them to fly at speeds of up to 80 kilometers per hour. When foraging, they use their wings like flippers, propelling themselves underwater to chase schools of sand eels across the open sea. In winter, common murres leave the Shetland Islands and migrate southward. They fly over a vast expanse of water, reaching depths of up to 90 meters. Central North Sea. This area features a diverse geological structure with sand, mud, gravel, interspersed with patches of rocky reefs. The Central North Sea is a gathering place for marine life. It has witnessed remarkable blooming events of various plankton species. These blooms form the foundation of life for more than 230 fish species, such as cod, haddock, mackerel, and herring. On the seafloor, around 700 groups of macrofauna take shelter, with greater diversity in the north but higher biomass in the south. The rocky shelves and outcrops in the northern part of the central region are rare spots where cold water coral appears, along with deep-sea sponges and brittle stars. Life in the central North Sea begins with bursts of phytoplankton blooms in spring and summer. At these times, the sea surface glows with a jade blue hue, so vivid that it can be seen from satellites. In 2025, such a bloom appeared off the coast of Shetland, with a blanket of phytoplankton stretching over 160 kilometers. As phytoplankton rapidly increase, zooplankton immediately gather. They make up 70 to 90% of the zooplankton biomass. And this leads to major shifts in the ecosystem here. Bloom events along the continental shelf edge create energy hotspots. The time when phytoplankton bursts into bloom is also when basking sharks arrive in the open waters of the North Sea. They are the second largest shark species on the planet, just behind the whale shark. On average, an adult measures about 7 to 8 meters long and weighs over 4.5 tons. But basking sharks are not hunters. Their wide jaws hold thousands of tiny teeth, just 5 to 6 millimeters long, curved inward and not built for tearing. Instead, they are masters of filter feeding, with a primary strategy known as ram feeding. While feeding, basking sharks cruise slowly at a speed of 3.7 kilometers per hour. Their cone-shaped mouths stay continuously open, reaching a width of 1 meter. They sweep up zooplankton along with hundreds of tons of seawater. A 5-meter-long individual can filter up to 450 tons of water in just 60 minutes, thanks to a gill raker system that measures 10 to 12 centimeters long. Basking sharks do not hibernate. They dive as deep as 900 meters in cold weather to search for food, and in spring and summer they return to the surface of the North Sea to enjoy the plentiful food from seasonal blooms. Phytoplankton blooms also draw common minke whales to these waters to enjoy a rich supply of food, including herring, sand eel, and plankton. There are about 8,900 individuals in the population within the central North Sea, As the smallest species in the rorqual family, they measure just 8 to 10 meters long and weigh around 9 tons. But beneath that slender frame lies a set of highly skilled feeding techniques. In the prey-rich waters of the North Sea, common minke whales make full use of the lunge feeding technique. When spotting a school of fish near the surface, they surge forward at high speed, opening their mouths nearly 90 degrees to engulf the entire group. Their bellies are lined with ventral pleats that expand like a giant water pouch, allowing them to hold more than 20 cubic meters of water. After the lunge, the water is pushed out through 460 to 720 baleen plates, which filter and trap the prey. At times, common minke whales also use a technique called surface side lunge feeding. They make swift lunges near the surface, tilting their bodies instead of keeping upright like in standard lunge feeding. This method is especially effective when schools of fish and plankton are swimming close to the water's surface. Common minke whales show a high degree of individual specialization. Each whale sticks to its own preferred technique to gain an advantage while foraging. The 1989 study, The Foraging Specializations of Individual Minke Whales, found that common minke whales tend to specialize in just one of two feeding strategies: lunge feeding or bird-associated feeding. This specialization helps them maximize feeding efficiency, adapt better to their surroundings, and reduce competition within the species. Across the rich surface waters of the central North Sea, sudden bursts of breath erupt, sending columns of spray 3 to 4 meters high. Humpback whales have arrived in this feeding ground. These giants, weighing up to 40 tons, were once rarely seen in the North Sea. However, since the early 2000s, their numbers here have clearly increased, with some individuals even staying for several months. Humpback whales use the bubble net feeding technique to forage in the central North Sea. They continuously blow bubbles, forming a circular net to trap schools of prey. Then, all at once, they dive deep and surge upward with mouths wide open to engulf the catch. Water rushes out through a system of 540 to 800 baleen plates, trapping the food in their throats. When prey schools are less dense, humpback whales switch to a different strategy: trap feeding. They remain still, holding their mouths wide open for about 18 to 30 seconds. As small fish swim in to escape seabirds, the whales quickly close their mouths and swallow the prey. Trap feeding is an energy-efficient hunting method. This technique was first documented in 2 humpback whales off the east coast of Vancouver Island, Canada, in 2011. By 2015, trap feeding had been observed in at least 16 individuals. This is a clear example of horizontal cultural transmission, where these whales watch and learn from each other. Humpback whales' hunting skills are also passed down through family generations. After birth, calves swim alongside their mothers to learn how to breathe, dive, find food, and communicate. They form small, flexible pods, usually consisting of 5 to 15 individuals. And when summer arrives, they head into the North Sea, creating a new secondary corridor for feeding during their migration journeys that span thousands of kilometers. Amid the vast North Sea, a shallow sandbank rises like an island in the ocean. This is Dogger Bank, a glacial deposit from the last ice age and the remnant of Doggerland that has since submerged. Dogger Bank lies about 100 kilometers off the east coast of England, stretching 320 kilometers from England to Germany, the Netherlands, and Denmark. This sandbank covers roughly 17,600 square kilometers with an average depth of 25 to 30 meters. That shallow sea area creates a nutrient hotspot thanks to ocean currents and the mixing of polar flows. It is home to 176 species of mega-epifauna, 14 species of amphipods, totaling 8,444 individuals. Dogger Bank also hosts high densities of herring, sand eel, and cod, making it a rich feeding ground for seabirds, seals, and whales. The common bottlenose dolphin is one of the most active predators at Dogger Bank. They hunt in small pods of 5 to 25 individuals and rely on echolocation to communicate and locate food. When they find a school of small fish, common bottlenose dolphins create a mud ring around the prey. They drive the prey to jump to the surface, where other pod members are waiting. This strategy is passed down from mother to calf within each pod through observation and practice. In the shallow seabed areas around Dogger Bank, common bottlenose dolphins switch to trapping strategies. They use their bodies, reaching up to 4 meters long and weighing between 150 and 650 kilograms, to herd prey toward the seafloor before feeding. Echolocation plays a crucial role in locating prey within the murky, sandy environment. The common bottlenose dolphin is one of the smartest marine creatures on the planet. This species has an encephalization quotient of 5.26, surpassing even chimpanzees. They use signature whistles, like personal names, to recognize and communicate with other individuals. They are also known for their self-awareness, ability to imitate, and use of simulated language. Unlike the common bottlenose dolphin, the common dolphin hunts in large pods, ranging from 20 to several hundred individuals. Common dolphins are widely distributed throughout the Northeast Atlantic Ocean, including the central North Sea, with a population of about 50,000 to 70,000. They visit Dogger Bank annually from May to October to feed. Common dolphins move agilely, surrounding schools of prey such as shoaling sand eel, herring, and mackerel. They swim at speeds of 30 kilometers per hour and can accelerate up to 60 kilometers per hour to herd prey into a giant bait ball. Sometimes these dolphins drive the small fish toward the shore, where they hunt while also teaching their calves. Common dolphin calves measure only 0.9 to 1.1 meters long. They rely mainly on their mother's milk during early life, which lasts from 12 to 18 months. This is the period when they learn communication, foraging, and pod culture. From Dogger Bank, moving southeast, the North Sea meets the coasts of the Netherlands and Germany, opening into the vast German Bight. With depths ranging from 10 to 50 meters, this area features a system of lagoons and barrier islands. It is home to 1,866 species of macrozoobenthos and serves as a breeding and nursery ground for important fish species that form the foundation of the North Sea food web. Located along the coasts of the Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark, is a UNESCO World Heritage Natural Site recognized in 2009. The Wadden Sea stretches about 500 kilometers and covers up to 10,000 square kilometers. Nature here operates on tidal rhythms, creating tidal flats, salt marshes, wetlands, and unique sand dunes. The biomass of marine plants and animals in the Wadden Sea is 10 to 20 times higher than in the deeper waters beyond. About 10,000 species of flora and fauna have been recorded here, including more than 2,700 aquatic species and 2,300 terrestrial species. Each year, approximately 10 to 12 million migratory birds pass through the Wadden Sea, with peak seasons seeing up to 6.1 million individuals at once. Marine mammals such as pinniped species and cetaceans also regularly inhabit these waters. Similar to the Shetland Islands, the German Bight and Wadden Sea are also important breeding grounds for grey seals. More than 11,000 individuals gather in these waters each year to give birth and molt, and along the coastal sandbanks, intense battles for territory and breeding rights unfold. Grey seals exhibit polygynous mating behavior. Each male holds a territory within the breeding ground and mates with multiple females from September to December. They fast during this period, which can last for several weeks, focusing on defending their territory from rival males. Some individuals lose up to 25% of their body weight due to fasting and prolonged stress. Due to intense competition, only a small number of male grey seals get the chance to mate. Males that fail to establish a breeding territory swim back into the sea. They continue feeding and look for opportunities to challenge the territories of other males. Some even use a satellite male strategy. Instead of holding territory, they sneak in to approach females when the breeding ground becomes chaotic. Female grey seals typically give birth to one pup per year. Newborns weigh around 10 to 18 kilograms, but within about 3 weeks, they double or even triple in size thanks to their mother's milk, which contains 60% fat. During this time, mother seals fast to protect their pups from males and external threats. However, after a brief 3 weeks, mother grey seals suddenly leave. The pups remain at the breeding site for several days to weeks, instinctively learning how to swim and hunt. They survive on the fat reserves gained from their mother's milk. Once ready, they head out to sea to find food and begin independent life. If you had to choose one species to represent adaptability and survival in the North Sea, would you pick the grey seal or the orca? Leave us a comment and let us know. In the Wadden Sea, no species adapts to tidal rhythms better than the shore crab. They can thrive in environments with wide fluctuations in salinity, like the Wadden Sea. They move agilely between deep waters during high tide and sand flats at low tide. These small creatures, with shells about 60 millimeters long, migrate along tidal paths to optimize their feeding. Each night, shore crabs follow the rising tide to access a diverse range of coastal food sources. Their main prey includes clams, snails, polychaete worms, and sometimes small animal carcasses. They use their claws to crack shells and pick out the soft meat inside. The shallow areas of the Wadden Sea provide ideal hiding spots for shore crabs. They take shelter under rocks or bury themselves in mud and seaweed to avoid airborne predators. Their gill slits help them retain moisture and breathe when the water recedes. When threatened, shore crabs will voluntarily shed a body part to escape. This is usually a leg or a claw. They actively detach the limb at the autonomy plane by contracting special muscles around that joint. The lost part regenerates during subsequent molts. Shore crabs are considered small engineers of the ecosystem in the Wadden Sea and German Bight. They help regulate benthic populations. Their digging activities oxygenate the sediment and supply nutrients to the seafloor. They also serve as a food source for larger creatures. Yet this stopover now faces mounting pressures. Nutrient-rich runoff from agriculture and cities has turned it into a hotspot of eutrophication. Prolonged algal blooms drain oxygen from the seafloor, causing dead zones to expand further and further. Some harmful algae even trigger the so-called blue sea phenomenon, cyanobacteria blooms that pose risks to both animals and people. Rising temperatures are also creating a serious challenge for species that depend on sea ice. From 1993 to 2022, the surface water temperature of the Baltic Sea increased by about 1.44 degrees Celsius. Winter ice has shown a clear decline, with only one harsh winter in the past 30 years, between 1995 and 2024, when ice cover exceeded 270,000 square kilometers. The winters of 2019 and 2020 are considered the worst in this sea, with ice cover shrinking to just 37,000 square kilometers. The legacy of toxic substances such as PCB, dioxins and pesticides still lingers in the bodies of fish, birds and seals. They disrupt reproduction and affect the development of the entire ecosystem. On top of that come invasive species, plastic waste, artificial noise, and accidental net entanglements that claim the lives of seabirds, seals, and even harbor porpoises. Fish stocks that once sustained millions of people are now being eroded by overfishing. Cod, herring, and salmon, three iconic species, are all in decline, shaking the very foundation of the food web. The eastern Baltic cod population has even evolved, with adult individuals shrinking to half their former size in order to slip through fishing nets. A small sea is bearing immense pressures, and every change here echoes as a warning bell for the entire planet. And that warning bell is being heard through a range of international cooperation mechanisms. In 1974, the Helsinki Convention laid the first foundation, binding all coastal nations to work together to prevent pollution from both land and sea. From there, the Baltic Sea Action Plan was developed as a strategic roadmap, with goals to reduce eutrophication, limit toxins, protect biodiversity, and promote sustainable maritime development. To date, about 60% of the actions have been implemented, including the expansion of marine protected areas to nearly 12% of the sea's surface. Alongside regional efforts stands the legal framework of the European Union. The Marine Strategy Framework Directive of 2008 applies to all member states. Marine spatial planning and new initiatives such as Protect Baltic continue to strengthen the network of protected areas and restore sensitive habitats. Community organizations are also raising their voices strongly. The Baltic Sea Action Group has called for hundreds of commitments from businesses and regenerative farming. Baltic Compass connects farmers with the environment, while the Baltic Sea Parliamentary Conference fosters political dialogue. Thanks to these efforts, the Baltic Sea is gradually becoming a symbol of cross-border cooperation for a shared goal, the preservation of the flame of hope for renewal. Share this video if you want to spread that hope to even more people. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to keep joining us on our next adventures.